Hey, Bob Faris, how the hell are you?
Hey man, good to see you, Glenn.
Likewise, likewise. It's been a long time. Been a long time. And since we last saw each other, you've done quite a few things, right?
Yeah, I guess it's been I suppose it's been what, almost 30 years.
Yeah, I think I saw you briefly in Edmonds when I was randomly there, and you were randomly there, and that was like 2008. And it was randomly on the street, but other than that, yeah,
Oh yeah.
it's been a long
Yeah.
time.
It has. It has. I do, yeah, I have a vague memory of that. I One of the things I've noticed about my my life is that I remember so little of it. Like
Right.
it's embarrassing. I mean, it's all been, mostly it's been pretty pleasant, but um it's shockingly low recall. So you'll have to bear with me
Yeah, no,
to get
I trust me, I'm with you on that. With you on that. So, I mean, the important part is you're doing what you're doing now, right? Which is, um, you're a professor of sociology at UC Davis, right?
correct.
Congratulations. And you're one of like five people I know who actually went on and got their PhDs. So double congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Um, and your topic is really interesting. So I don't know if it's your primary topic, but it's certainly the one that you're most known for, right? Is bullying, right? And the effects of bullying and the causes, which are even more important, right?
Yep.
Can you just tell me a little bit about that? Like what is you, and I know it's a huge topic, right? But I mean, what are, like, if you had like four or five or six points, right, of to talk about bullying, like what are they?
Um, yeah, so I've been studying bullying for probably since, I guess, probably around 2006 or five, something like that, is when
Hmm.
I started my dissertation work. And at the time, things have changed since then, but at the time, the field was kind of dominated by work that was really trying to identify kind of pathological
Hmm.
underlying pathologies that produce these kind of aggressive reactions.
Hmm.
Um, I think that's true. I mean, there is a lot of evidence to suggest that at least some bullying behavior is driven by psychological deficiencies and
Hmm.
emotional maladjustment, problematic home lives. But I didn't feel like it captured the whole story. And so what I was sort of interested in, and what I suspected, and it's not, I wasn't the first to, make this, to test this idea. Um, but what I suspected is that these kinds of behaviors are actually interwoven in the social hierarchies of schools, and
Hmm.
that these are not marginalized, socially marginal behaviors, but they're like embedded in these school hierarchies. And if that's the case, then there must be some ways of doing it that allow kids to accomplish their social goals. So
Hmm.
that was, basically, I mean, you know the simple idea that I spent a lot of time testing is that aggression is a way of attaining and maintaining social status, and it's a really simple
Yeah.
idea. It's very
Yeah.
straightforward, but actually demonstrating it is somewhat challenging. But that's what I've been doing and I'm kind of like at the end of that now.
Hmm.
I've said close to everything I feel like I need to say
Yeah.
about this topic, so I'm sort of looking ahead to something new. But I think it has been super interesting, and it's been quite a journey, and with a lot of interesting surprises along the way.
Yeah. So
Um,
a couple of quick questions, right? One
yeah.
is what made you fall into that as sort of a field of study? And the second one is a little bit of bigger question. Do you think those traits that happen in adolescence in regards to bullying carry over into adulthood, or are they sort of a means to an end and then it stops, or do you find that these individuals continue that type of behavior throughout their entire like working career?
uh, Great question. What was your first question, though?
Oh, sorry. The first one is what brought you into this? Because as far as I
Oh,
remember,
yeah.
you weren't
Okay.
bullied as a kid, but I mean, maybe you had friends that were, or
Actually,
or
no, actually, well, yeah, no, I used to get my ass kicked on the not on the daily, but it wasn't in Edmonds. It was I grew up in till I was 10. I grew up in outside of Baltimore in
Oh, I didn't know
Towson.
that. Okay.
Yeah, and I was well liked. It was like a very warm elementary school. Like my elementary school experience was just fantastic. Like it seemed like it was a very inclusive and welcoming place. But the in transit to and from elementary school is when I was like basically a slow moving antelope and on the Serengeti, like
Right.
these two brothers, the Johnny and Bradley Bruns, used to just ambush me and just beat the shit out of me. Like I would
Right.
come home with a bloody nose at least once a week.
That's funny. So I grew up in northern Idaho and I experienced, well, I'm sorry, before northern Idaho, I actually lived in Las Vegas when I was like a little kid, like, 8 or whatever. And I'd get my ass kicked every single day on the way home from school every day until
Yeah,
finally I just said, fuck this. And I started swinging back. And what I learned is, like yourself, I'm a tall guy. I may not be, like built, but I'm a tall guy. And my reach, I could kick anyone's ass, right? Or at least scare them enough they wouldn't come too close to me, right? So
yeah,
I'm totally down with that. And it took a long time before that sort of bullying went away,
yeah.
right? And
Yeah, for me, it was up until the day we moved. Like, and I would, kind of, I remember changing the bus stop that I would,
hmm
take on,
I've done that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, the avoidance is the natural thing. But what's so that's the kind of the cute answer to why I got into this. There's a more boring one, which is that I'm just interested in conflict, and adolescents are,
hmm
convenient to study for a variety of reasons.
Well, and
But
now you have a daughter, so you get to watch it like firsthand, right?
yeah, yeah, and you're already seeing some of these kind of exclusionary behaviors, but um, yeah. So, but one of the insights I took from that experience in Baltimore was that you know a bloody nose. I guess I didn't really learn this until later, but so I moved to Edmonds,
hmm
and when I got to Edmonds, we arrived in the middle of fourth grade, and I was a new kid, and I got things off at the wrong, on the wrong foot. This kid named Micah. The teacher introduced me. This is the very first day. I'm in the class for for 5 minutes, and after the teacher introduced me, she told Miss Williams told me to go sit at my desk, and then this kid Micah turned around and asked me, "Are you fast?" And I didn't. I said, "Yeah." And, like nobody who was not severely disabled was slower than I was in that classroom. So
Right.
that set things. That was off on the wrong foot, right from the beginning. But what was different about it is that it wasn't like I was beat up or anything. I mean, Dave Burdine was a little bit scary, but I don't recall anybody ever actually beating me up.
Dude, I mean,
But
not to get into that. Sorry, just one sec. He was the only human I knew who at like 12 had a full mustache, right? Like
oh, dude, was yeah,
insane, insane.
yeah,
But now I
yeah,
think about it, and he actually was just a little kid. Like he looked like a little kid with a mustache, right? But back then
yeah.
he was terrifying.
Yeah, he was big. I mean, he was big, and yeah, he was scary. And I've reconnected, like everybody has, with all the social media. I actually reconnected with him, and he's perfectly pleasant.
hmm
But like there was a time where he was terrifying, and my dad actually we were driving. I mean, I wonder if Dave will ever listen to this, but we were driving, and um, Dave Burdine has no idea how close he got to having a scary encounter with my father. Like I said, we were driving by, and I said, "Oh, that's Dave Burdine." And my dad said, "Oh, he started almost started to pull over." So I want to scare the shit out of him.
And back then, a
Um,
father could get away with that, right? So it's
right,
totally different
right,
than
yeah,
today.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's so much stuff that parenting has changed quite a bit. But yeah. Anyway, what I learned though was that it wasn't really physical when I was in Edmonds. It was social, and that the insight I got from that is that felt very personal. The getting my ass kicked in Towson, not personal. That's just a way of the Serengeti.
Right.
Like these guys. that's what they do, and that's what I'm here for. But because they were pretty indiscriminate, they would beat up other kids too. But but I was not get, I was left out of stuff, and that felt isolating, and it's tough, but it's I'm sort of grateful to it for it, because it has you know it kind of fostered an empathy, and sort of a connection to underdogs and kids who feel left out. And so that's been kind of an underlying motivation. Like all the stuff that I do, all the research, it's very quantitative and everything. There's a lot of data, but it at the heart of it is like the plight of these kids.
Right.
I would like to, I feel like incredible, anguish, when I read the accounts of what they go through.
D- Do you think, and this is kind of a personal question, so you can gloss over it if you want, but do you think some of that is part of the motivation of having a child a little bit later on in life? Like, do you want to like give a child like a quote better life than you had?
It was not that strategic. I was not in the right
Right,
relationships until
right.
later.
That makes sense. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. So it was not. I can't. That was not something that was planned. But
Right.
I'm in the right,
Hmm.
in a very happy right marriage right now. So
Yeah, no,
uh,
you guys are adorable, by the way. Like, cute little family.
thank you.
I'm just waiting for a picture of you and your daughter like standing on top of an elk. Like, I'm sure that's
Yeah,
coming at
yeah.
some point.
I'm working on her. I'm working on her.
That's so funny.
Um, yeah. So anyway, so that's how I got into it, I would say. But the dry, the intellectual motivation was, well, I'm interested in conflict and
Hmm.
understanding it. And when I got to grad school, I had never taken, maybe I took one sociology class that was not very remarkable, but basically didn't really know what sociology was about.
Right. So
And
you were doing international studies or something like that, right?
Yeah,
Before
yeah,
high
that was
school.
my major. Yeah, because it seemed more rigorous and intense. And at one point, I sort of fancied, a career in the foreign service or something.
Hmm.
Um, uh, but anyway, yeah. So that like very early on in grad school, I saw somebody showed an image of a social network, and I was just like captivated by that
Hmm.
representation of social life. It just seemed to make so much sense, and it also seemed so sciency,
Right.
which was attractive. So those two kind of like the emotional side of it and the intellectual interest in conflict coincided. But initially I was like, I started working at a prison in North Carolina because I thought
Oh,
that
wow.
would be an interesting place to try to study conflict.
Hmm.
And it turns out, it's super hard to get approval to study incarcerated
Hmm.
people. So um, this other opportunity fell into my lap, and I was, through the generous support of the PI on this large panel study, she allowed me to add questions about bullying on it, which were pretty labor intensive. It was incredibly generous, and like
Hmm.
from that, I built, like my career, so such that it is.
That's incredible. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how sometimes those little things that happen, and suddenly you're like, that's my entire life. Like,
Yeah,
there's one
yeah,
decision that somebody made that totally
yeah,
changes your entire life,
yeah.
right? It's
Probably
fascinating.
like that's like 20 years right there.
Yeah.
It's
So you
crazy.
say one thing, like I'm actually reading your website, which I'll link down so people can actually look at. But there's one sentence or fragment that actually jumped out to me, and it says, "Adolescent aggression is not deviant but normal. It's not reactive but instrumental." So, and I paraphrase a little bit there, but I found that really, really, really interesting because I completely agree with it, but it's not a thought that had ever gone through my head. Right? It makes perfect sense. Because we are animals, and animals by nature we're aggressive, and we try to get to the top of the chain like that. That's it's in all of us, right? Um, how did that sort of conclusion go over with your peers? Because I can't imagine that going over super well.
Um, yeah, that's a good question. And I don't really have a great answer for it because I'm a weird, um, academic, and I mean, a lot of like successful academics are pretty good at networking, and they go to conferences and all that, and they have they have ties to the people working in their field. And I'm I mean, for a network scholar, I'm kind of like a social isolate.
Hmm.
I don't have my ear to the ground um, as much as I probably should in this field. Partly because I mean, some of the stuff is unbearably boring.
Hmm.
It's been dominated by psychologists, and I have a lot of respect for psychological work. It's very careful and precise, and they care a lot on about measurement, which is important.
Hmm.
But I just got sort of overwhelmed with the tiny little salami slices, papers, like looking at these little, fine grained, you know, like I found it boring, and so
Hmm.
I don't really know. I mean, I think my sense is that I'm not like the people who are squarely in the bullying field probably view me, if they even think of me at all, as something of an interloper.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes sense. I mean, unfortunately, that's kind of the way that academia is, right? Like, if you dare step outside of the social norms, then, good luck to you.
there's a lot of turf, yeah, turf
Right.
wars.
But you brought this up a couple of times now, and I find this really interesting. So, what in your mind, what is the difference between a psychological study of bullying and a sociological study of bullying? Like, where do they differ, right? In terms of, well, a lot of things. Like, how do they differ? I guess is the real question.
Yeah. There's a lot, I guess, I don't want to, there's not a clear cut line, but there's a lot of overlap. But I
Hmm.
would say, in a nutshell, sociologists don't spend so much time. I mean, the vast majority of bullying research is conducted by psychologists and people in the education field, which is interdisciplinary, but strongly influenced by psychology.
Hmm.
And I would say there's a lot of attention to what's going on in the mind
Right.
at the individual level, and psychological traits, in their relationship to these behaviors. And you know, the sociological perspective on bullying takes into consideration how it is integrated into social settings and
Hmm.
systems. There's I'll plug a book. There's an edited volume that hopefully will be coming out next year, by NYU Press. I've contributed to it, but it's a
Hmm.
sociology of bullying, and it's like the first compendium of sociological research on bullying.
That's
And
excellent.
there's some really really cool stuff about how kids use and police norms to
Right.
advance their interests. I don't know if you've come across the book "Dude, You're a Fag" by C.J. Pasco.
No, but actually, somebody referred me to it at some point. I haven't read
Uh,
it, but yeah.
yeah, it's a good read. I assigned it to my undergrad classes, and it's a great ethnography that shows how um, masculinity in particular is policed
Right.
and used in different ways to advance different interests. But so sociologists would be spending, would be looking at these things as a social system
Right. Versus the
rather than
individual.
individual behavior.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense to me. That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, this is all really, really fascinating to me. I mean, do you think that bullying is a natural state of humanity, or do you think it's something that has been created by society?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, so as a sociologist, I mean, okay, so a lot of people think, okay, well, to bring up the example of an elk, like, these are elk are social animals or herd animals,
Hmm.
and they have a hierarchy, and the hierarchy is, decided by violence. And
Right.
violence occurs when there there exists some ambiguity about the outcome of the bout, right?
Hmm.
Like the herd bull doesn't get challenged until there's been some apparent weakening, and then it becomes
Right.
unclear about who would win. Um, and I think that there are some useful lessons from that we can draw from the behaviors, the antagonistic behaviors of social animals. But there's an interest, I think there's a clear line of difference between humans and animals in the sense that the role of the audience. Audiences interpret the outcomes of bouts or
Right.
battles, and it's possible in human life to win a fight by even if you've lost the physical fight, to win the audience
Oh,
over you,
that's
which is not
interesting.
possible among humans. So, like a great example of this is that I always point to because it's one of the most clear cut. Have you seen Cool Hand Luke? I
Yeah,
assume.
of course. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I asked my undergrads if they
And they're like, what?
if they would have heard of it. Yeah, yeah.
Who's Robert
So,
Redford? Right.
yeah. No, Paul, blonde, blue eyes, blonde, Paul. Anyway,
Oh, that's right. Yeah, yeah. You know what? I told you before we started, I'm not a movie guy. So yeah.
yeah. Anyway, but there's a great scene where so there's some insult that occurs in he's incarcerated. There's some insult. They and the way they adjudicate these things is they have on Saturday they have boxing. They
Right.
box it out, fight it out. So all the men are out there and they're in a ring, and the guy the Paul Newman. Paul
Yeah.
Newman.
Actually, I just had to look it up. I was just
Yeah.
about to say that.
The guy Paul Newman insults is Dragline, played by George Kennedy, who was an NFL player,
Right.
huge, mountain of a man,
And still a huge
and
guy. He's still. Oh no, he died in 2016. Okay, never mind. But yeah, he
so
was huge
yeah,
when he died.
he was huge, yes, and so you can, the outcome of this is pretty clear, and nothing is surprising. I mean, but what happens in the scene is that Paul Newman, he's getting the shit beat out of him. I mean, he's
Right.
getting knocked down like brain damage kind of
Right.
knockdowns, and he keeps on getting up, and he keeps on getting up and swinging. And at some point, there's a moment where like Dragline just hits him so hard he gets knocked down, and he gets back up. At this point, like all the audience is sort of turned. They start to feel a little sick about this,
Right.
and he keeps on getting up and swinging, and then eventually Dragline just carries him over his shoulder. And I think that's a good example of winning a fight despite losing it, which is not
Right.
possible among animals.
Right. And I mean, just to take this one step further, I mean, basically, the first Rocky movie was a replay of that entire scene. Like the entire movie was basically that
Right,
scene, just like 2 hours
right,
long.
yeah,
Um,
that's right.
and actually, the rest of the Rockies were exactly the same, just the same thing over and over again, just different opponent.
I've only
Um,
seen one of them.
I
Yeah,
unfortunately have seen at least three, and apparently there's like six. I don't know. I mean, there's a huge amount of them. Um, the big one was when he fought the Russian, right? Dolph Lundgren, right, who was playing
right,
the
right,
Russian, and that was
right.
like the big thing. I remember as a kid, just like, oh, because that's right
Cool.
as the U.S. and Russia were when the U.S. team won the hockey, in the
Oh, right,
Olympics,
right,
it was a
right,
huge
right.
deal. Like 1980 was like,
Oh yeah, I
oh,
remember.
yeah, and so here we go. Not even a Russian, mind you, Dolph Lundgren. Definitely not
Right.
Russian, but yeah, whatever. He's the bad guy, right? The bad Russian. So
Yeah.
that actually
So go
that
ahead.
brings me. I'm sorry. That brings me up to something really interesting. So I mean, that is a form of bullying as well, isn't it? Is it not? I mean, like when you pick a group of people and you go out of your way, like especially in the U.S., we go out of our way to demonize certain cultures for doing certain things, right? And we're really careful now. We don't do it based on race, right? We're very careful. We're like, oh, this society, right? So we just kick that word up a level, right? Instead of like race or ethnic group or whatever, we're like, oh, that society is bad, right? Do you see any correlation between that and like a kid bullying a sixth grader bullying another sixth grader?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that comes to mind is there's an interesting and provocative paper that came out a couple years ago about the Trump effect,
Mm-hmm.
which showed that the share of Trump vote in a county was associated with increased rates of bullying.
Mm-hmm.
I could be getting some of the details wrong, but it basically showed that there was this unexplained spike in bullying that's
Sure.
correlated with the Trump vote, and I think that's entirely plausible. Yeah, so for me, like the the field of bullying is another thing about that. The field of bullying, which has been dissatisfactory to me, is how um, kind of I think narrow-minded the definition of bullying has been.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the industry standard is that it's harm, repeated harm
Mm-hmm.
done to somebody. That to me is a little too broad.
Yeah, super, super
It's
broad.
simultaneously too broad and too narrow. Like too broad in the sense that I feel like bullying is more specific than just harming someone,
Right.
but too narrow in the sense that it doesn't have to be repeated. I don't think, I think I would consider, I mean, I know I'm aware of lots of tragedies, a number of tragedies that arose out of a single incident.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's not so important in my mind. But what is important to me is the element of cruelty. And I think that is, if anything is at the heart of bullying for me at least, it's cruelty. And it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's the unnecessary, the extra kind of twist of the knife, the unnecessary, kind of going out of your way just to hurt someone without any ostensible purpose.
Right. So,
So to the extent that that kind of scapegoating fits into that perspective, I would say yeah.
mm-hmm. So, I, I, you kind of gave an answer, but not really. I mean, do you think that this is natural human behavior, or no?
I wanted to come back to that. So um, you'll have people who will say yes. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
evolutionary psychologists will find a reason, and it's easy to point to that. I as a sociologist, I tend to think about this a little differently. I don't. I Okay, so I'm starting to work on a book that will be my final thoughts on this topic. But
Perfect.
the central hypothesis of the book or conjecture is that a lot of the behaviors that we think of as adolescent in nature
Mm-hmm.
are products of the context in which people find themselves rather than some intrinsic part of the life course.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason, in other words, that teenagers act like teenagers is because we stick them in schools cages, and
Interesting.
they're stuck together, and they don't have any formal organization.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of free time, and they're stuck together for extended periods of time, and so they have to sort out status for themselves. And
Okay.
but adults are rarely in similar situations. So, but when they are, I suspect they're going to act like teenagers.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
So,
I
so people like in prison, but also people in reality TV. You put a bunch of grown-ups in a house or on an island, they're going to act like teenagers.
yeah. I mean, so I can just say this very, very briefly, and it's totally just my experience, but having closing on 30 years now of managing software teams, and we're talking some of the meekest humans on the planet, right? And certainly socially awkward. Um, they fight like the gladiators, to gain footing. It's I've seen it over and over again in people that are just the most passive humans on the planet. Suddenly, it's like, no, my idea is better, and they will go to the mat for that,
Yeah.
right? And that does include um, surreptitiously pushing somebody under the bus, right? And that happens a lot. I mean, a lot, a lot.
Uh-huh.
Um, Bob, I know we could probably talk for a long time. I know we've got to like wrap up
Oh,
here.
I can keep going for another. Yeah, I can. This
Okay,
other thing is, I've got probably another five or
okay.
so.
So there's one thing that I have to do, right? So
Yeah.
I want to dig back in. So I'm going to just have you back on. We can do
Okay.
a longer thing sometime else. But um, one thing that I do is you know primarily focused around music stuff. So
Uh-huh.
this is a fun thing. Actually, I have two questions I ask everyone, no matter where they come from, right? So the first one is involving music. All right, because I think that's a good bellwether, basically, for figuring out like where people are coming from or whatnot.
Mhm.
And everyone hates this question, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. What's your favorite band?
Oh man, my favorite band.
Nobody likes the question, man. That's why I ask
Um,
it. Like I can't answer the question, so that's why I ask it. Actually, hold on, Bob. Let's back up. You're
okay,
writing a paper, right?
right.
So
What am I
you're
listening
in the
to?
midst of writing a paper, and assuming you listen to music while you work, what would you be listening to? Like if as you're writing your book, for example, like what do you listen to like keep you going, keep you motivated?
Miles Davis, probably. You know.
That actually makes sense. I mean, in a lot of ways. One is that it's sort of that weird kind of disconnected, discombobulated sort of thing happening,
Yeah.
which kind of fits with your topic, right? I mean, because
Yeah.
I get that.
I I didn't understand jazz. I still don't really claim to understand jazz, but I couldn't even relate or connect to it until I was probably 40. Like
That's
then
funny.
it started to make sense. Not completely. It's still like otherworldly in a lot of ways, but
Hmm.
it's so like there's so many unexpected twists.
Right,
Like I just don't didn't see that coming, you know.
right.
And it's also it's kind of stimulating in the background, but it's not going to dominate, you know, the cognitive process.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Completely agree with that. Um, and then the last question, and this one people hate even more, which
Okay.
is why I ask it, is what is one thing about you that nobody would know?
Um,
I love everyone gives that same look when I ask that question too. It's like,
um, well, I don't have that much of a, you know, that interesting of a private life.
well, but see,
Um,
everyone's interesting. So, like, I can shout up a bunch about you, right? I mean, like, you do it on like social media or not, whatnot. I don't know if you do it like with your students or coworkers or collaborators or whatnot. But you hunt, which is not,
oh yeah,
to be
that would be.
honest, yeah.
It's
I mean,
weird,
not a huge amount of people do that anymore. So, I mean,
right?
that's unique.
Yeah, that's unique. Okay, all right. I can list off some things that
There you go.
probably people don't know. I was in the Peace Corps.
Oh wow,
Hunt. I've been arrested, spent a night in jail.
nice, good for you, man. Hopefully for
Yeah,
something good. I'm hoping.
no, lame. It was lame, but
Lame. Oh, okay, that sucks. Oh well.
um, um, I have drunkenly petted an adult wild bear in the adult black bear in the wild. Uh,
Wow. Okay,
yeah.
okay. You can stop right there because that one.
Okay.
I'm going to end with one little story here. So when I was growing up as a kid, and I lived in northern Idaho, um, I was completely unprepared for living in that sort of environment. By the way, like I was a frail, tall, skinny kid, right? Um, and one time riding motorcycles in western Montana, which I'm also unequipped to do, right? So I'm on this motorcycle, don't even know how to turn the throttle. Like I have no idea what I'm doing, and we're like along this creek bed, and all of a sudden I hear from behind all these people screaming, "Stop! Stop! Stop!" or turn, whatever. I mean, like, my 10-year-old, 12-year-old brain, whatever, was like, I don't even understand what they're saying. Um, anyway, so I turn around and there's a enormous black bear, like right behind me, right? And I'm going as fast as this little motorbike can possibly go, right? Which is
Oh my
like,
god.
like, I don't know, 30 miles an hour, 40, whatever it was. But this bear was like right on my fucking ass. And I turned around and was like, holy shit! Like just as it like rears up on its back legs, right? Like right behind
Oh
me.
my god.
Yeah. So no, I get that. It can be absolutely
Well, wait, well,
terrifying.
what happened?
The bear finally just gave up. Like he was
Yeah,
like, "Oh, that was fun." Like I chased this little kid on a motorbike. Like,
it
and
to
now
the
I'm
heart
done.
attack. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think I stopped shaking for I don't know a few months. I would imagine. you know.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's wow. That would give you nightmares.
Yeah, and the question is, what would the bear have actually done if it caught me? And I think now that I'm older, I think the bear probably would have been like, "Ah, that was fun. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
carry on." Because black
Black
bears
bears
eat
are
people.
generally, you know, they're generally pretty skittish.
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky it wasn't a grizzly because where I was, like
Yeah,
grizzlies are
not so
prominent.
skittish. Yeah,
Yeah, but black bears are pretty damn big, man.
yeah. No,
Pretty damn
absolutely,
big. Definitely
absolutely.
terrifying. Bob, I know you have to go, man. Let's set up a second chat because I think
Okay,
there's a
all
lot,
right.
lot, lot more to get into.
Happy
Um,
to.
And I will reach out to you. Any links you want to put below, like whatever, we'll do that. And
Okay.
hey, good luck with your interview in
Thanks. Yeah.
10
Yeah.
minutes.
Sorry. Next time I'll block off more time.
Hey, no worries, man. Talk to you soon. Thank
All
you.
right. Sounds
Bye.
good. All right.